Have you ever wondered how your sales performance compares against your competitors and peers? The B2B Sales Benchmark Report provides the definitive guide to what success looks like in 2021. See how you compare in terms of win rate, sales cycle, average deal value, relationships, and engagement. You can see the results and get the full report at ebsta.com/B2B-sales-benchmarks. This is Sales Ops Demystified, the #1 most downloaded podcast in sales operations. We invite the brightest minds in sales operations onto the show to deconstruct the why, what, and how behind rep productivity, forecasting, metrics, and all things revenue. This podcast is brought to you by Ebsta, the leading customer engagement platform for Salesforce. Hello and welcome to another very special episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. And today we're joined by James Hayes. Now, James, I think we're looking at around 7 years experience in sales ops right now, currently VP of RevOps at Businessolver. So we're going to jump into that specifically, actually, to talk about running remote teams, remote sales teams more specifically. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And I want to first actually understand your transition into sales ops because I believe when you moved in, you weren't pushed into a revenue operations role. You came from a slightly different role into sales ops and then into RevOps. So I just want to understand that journey. If you'd be kind enough to share how that happened.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I go back all the way, I mean, as various analytical roles, working for a large bank, and I kind of transitioned into sales operations after that because I kept wanting to do more, but kind of just being in that industry, it just wasn't working for me. So I transitioned to a kind of a pre-IPO startup company. And kind of led their sales operations, or at least a small team there. And the transition from sales operations to revenue operations didn't actually happen until a few years after that. And that came about because the need to actually start looking at all revenue sources and also additional products that were going to be released. And additional teams that we're adding on. And there just wasn't any processes in place for those different segments. So the transition was kind of just morphed into that. Like, hey, sales operations, great. And it still is a fundamental part of what I do. But getting into the revenue operations was kind of a necessity to then harness the rest of the business.
Got it. So they were seeing what a great job you were doing with the sales team. And they were like, we need to get James to do more.
Yeah, sort of.
And now focusing on Businessolver, could you just roughly take us through the current tech stack?
Yeah, so I have like a good relationship with our marketing operations team, so I'll include some of their stuff. But for the sales side, we use Salesforce for our CRM. Our marketing platform is HubSpot. Those are directly linked. They speak back and forth. We also use ZoomInfo powered by discover.org, which is integrated our system. We use MyEdge, which is kind of a platform that pulls in 5,500 data since we deal with healthcare. We also have SalesLoft, which is for obvious reasons to help our Salesforce team. And we have a few others that we kind of bake in on the back end to help support that. But those are really our main ones.
Got it. And then roughly how many people in the RevOps team and how many reps, both service and sales, are you supporting?
Oh, man, we support. So on the RevOps team, there's now 8. And we also have our leader, which is also responsible for the BDR team and a few other areas that are there. And then the sales force, man, it's grown quite a bit, but we support three different segments within our core, and there's probably about 20 individuals on that team. And then we have three other segments outside of that, probably with another, I want to say 20 or so there. So we're looking at a team of around 40 to 45, depending on if you include leaders and cross-functionality or cross-functions.
Makes sense. Now, what I think is super interesting is you mentioned at the start of this call that you guys were primarily remote even before March of this year. Could you share more about how you think your job as a revenue ops leader changes with the remote team and an in-person team? As I assume you've worked with in-person or in-house teams or in-person teams before.
Yep. Yeah. So when I said mostly remote, it's mostly our sales org that's remote. And then we had a few people on the operations side remote. I actually enjoy going into the office quite a bit. I think how it's impacted the way that our team functions is mainly around projects and collaboration. We actually have to fit time on our calendars to specifically collaborate on certain things, whereas before you could walk over to somebody's office or desk and kind of discuss it face to face. So it's been sort of an issue trying to figure that out. Not to mention when you had quick questions, things of that nature. If you're in the same building, it was really easy to do that. So I find the team being adjusting to actually setting time on the calendar, not to specifically have a meeting, but to collaborate on certain projects. And I think that's kind of been extremely beneficial for us.
Makes sense. Now, rep productivity. Can you share an example of something that you have done at Businessolver that has boosted rep productivity significantly?
Yeah. So productivity, I kind of look at it as more about efficiency and spending the dollars and the time in the right spots. And so what we use is we like to score everything in our CRM. So what we do is we put a FIRE score, essentially a fit, intent, recency, and engagement score on just about all the leads. And then we roll those things up to the account. So what we do is we say, hey, as a consultant, if your territory has roughly 200 accounts in it, we know that 50 of those accounts are extremely engaged. They're a good fit from us from a firmographic standpoint. They have an intent that they want to maybe buy from us. They've been on our website, which is the recency, several times in the last few weeks, and they're engaged with our marketing content. And so what we do is we have our consultant that's updated real time to their dashboard, and they simply open that up in the beginning of the day, and they run through those accounts first thing every day. At least we try to coach them on to doing that because we did do some tests on that score a lot, and we found I think we tested on 10 accounts per consultant. And they were holding between 8 and 9 meetings out of those 10 accounts. So it was really effective for us. So we've continued that going forward.
Got it. And where are you getting the data from in order to create that score on each record?
Yeah. So we get most of our data from custom coding that we do in the background from the two systems of HubSpot and Salesforce. So what we do is we attach those instances together and we score the traffic coming in based on IP addresses or their domain. We also use a technology called Bombora, which gives us a lot of the intent data because they aggregate search data through Google, and we pull that in based on the keywords that we think our customers are searching for software like ours. So we score them a little bit differently. And then we use MyEdge and a few other techs to match up those domains for brokers, carriers, other channel partners to give them a score that way as well.
Awesome. Now, since the virus hit, as we know, we haven't shifted remote or non-remote. Has anything else changed? And have you had to adapt in any other way?
Oh, yeah, of course. So, I mean, we had to do a complete pipeline scrub to go through to see what deals were impacted by COVID. So what we did is we had our consultants go out to their current pipeline as well as anybody that they're having meetings with, and just directly ask them if it's going to impact. And we made a special field within Salesforce for them to mark. And it came back, and we ran our next analysis on where we thought we were going to hit. We had to make some adjustments on that number because it did impact our pipeline, as well as those that were in late stages within our pipeline. They actually had to back off a little bit. So we're hoping to keep them engaged through some marketing content, and hopefully when they come back around next year, because usually it's on an annual to 3 to 5 year contracts, we'll catch them then.
Got it. So we may have to push pipeline back a little bit. So that will have impacted the forecast.
Oh, dramatic. Yeah. Intensely. Yep.
Got it. Have you started to see in more recent weeks those deals coming back in, or is it still relatively uncertain?
So mainly in the government space, because their budget was kind of already set up. A lot of those deals maybe got on hold for just a little bit, but then they came back around because the budget was set in the beginning of the year. So they already had budget set aside for it. And that's kind of how those government deals work. As far as the private sector, we've seen a few come back around, mainly because they were thinking about making judgment calls on staff and things of that nature, and they just didn't have the numbers in check, because we get paid on per employee per month that's in our system. So if they came in with 4,000 people on their system, but then thought they were going to reduce their staff 20 to 30%, they were trying to get those numbers in line or to get then different pricing from us on the back end. So we have seen those ones, but then there's other ones that flat out said, we don't know how this is going to impact us. We don't want to impact our staff by making a fast change or a dramatic change this year. So maybe we'll look at it next year.
Got it. And were there any other changes you had to make in response to the virus?
Any other changes that I would make in response to the virus?
That you had to make over the past few months?
Oh, yeah. Not really. I mean, most of the time, like I said, we're working remote. We have done a few more analysis on the impact of COVID coming in. We've made adjustments to some of our marketing material for obvious reasons. We've also made a little change within our sales process to include a lot of those questions around discovery, to get a little bit more in discovery mode. To understand what their business looks like, what they think their business is going to look like in 6 months compared to 9 months, because we're always looking for those customers that we think are going to grow. Sometimes these companies, they don't know, but when we ask about COVID, a lot of them say, we may be reducing staff if X, Y, and Z does not happen within the next few months. And that's just really good for us to know, so we know how to better support them.
Got it. Makes sense. Now onto the forecasting process. What is your current process? How does that work, and who is involved?
Yeah, I love forecasting. So forecasting is only as good as the people who put the data in the system. So we do a couple. Yeah, we do a couple ways to do it. So we have one on the back end that we analyze the data using a score methodology. Like, we score everything on how far the deals are going down the pipeline, how much time in between each stage, who's on the deal from a contact standpoint, how engaged are they? All that stuff goes into kind of in the background. But as far as how it's run, we have what we call segment sales operations managers. We have the sales managers, and then we have kind of finance that's in there. And we usually do bi-weekly calls, but we kind of push it out to monthly because things are moving a little bit slower recently. So what they do is they get on the line after the sales manager has set their forecast within our Salesforce. It's pretty standard. You have your commit, you have your upside, you have your pipeline there. And we try to project out for the next quarter. So we go through where you're at this quarter, and then what you're projecting next quarter. And then if we have time, we'll go into what we can provide the following quarter that we may be able to pull into this quarter to help out if they're behind on deals. We also go through if they've given us some type of commit number, we kind of push on that number a little bit to say, okay, well, based on what we see in the pipeline, nothing has moved. And that's where I say it's about as good as the data they put in it, right? So that's where we get a lot of our context. What makes ours a little bit different, though, than I feel other companies is the segment sales operations leader on our team have had experience in sales, and they also work some of those deals that these guys are forecasting on or have. And by that, usually from a technical standpoint, so they can generally call out some erroneous data very quickly, which helps us quite a bit on our forecasting process.
Got it. Yeah, that makes total sense. Having the people involved actually understand selling.
Oh yeah.
Broader question now. What do you think has been the sales metric or KPI that's added the most value to your career in sales operations?
Sort of, well, I think KPIs change wherever you go. What I did here and previously is I just ran as many figures as I possibly could through the system, or analyzed as many as I possibly could to figure out what was actually making sense. Here, I settled on a couple layers. So from a marketing standpoint, we set up 7 milestones, and these milestones are point in time that puts a marketing engagement score on them. And we score our consultants by that, because what that does is if they're working their territory, their marketing engagement score should go up. So month over month, we follow that score and that trend line. And as long as it's making an upward trend across their entire territory, it's usually a pretty good sign. But then when you get down to the basics, I mean, you have your quota achievement, you have your meeting set, and things of that nature, which I think everybody pretty much tracks. But our consultants are scored. They have a score from 0 to 10. And that score rolls up all their basic activity, all their current pipeline, how far it is in the stages, how many times they've missed close dates, things of that nature. It's all rolled up. Like I said, I love scores, because what that does is it rolls up to our reporting, and we have it set up to then notify myself and the managers if a score drops below a certain threshold.
Interesting. I've never heard anyone do something like this. Obviously we hear a lot of companies scoring leads, customers, but never having this combined score for consultants or reps, and then using that to assess performance and flag alerts. That is super, super interesting.
Yeah, I love talking about it, because it is a beast of a Salesforce achievement, because we build it in Excel first, and then we build it in Salesforce.
Got it. And a final question: who is the person in sales ops or rev ops that you would most like to take for lunch?
There's several in my life. I mean, a lot of it I learned from Sales Benchmark Index, but I'd say get me started was probably a fellow named Jeff Coleman, which was at a previous employment. And then now recently, I'd say I have Matt Knoll, as well as Dave Moore. Dave Moore from a standpoint of just always keeping motivated, always looking for something that gets thrown forward. And Matt, basically around process and kind of sticking to the guns and moving forward with rev and sales operations.
Got it. James, I want any sales ops person or rev ops person listening to consider also scoring reps, looking at rep activity, and then rolling up things they do well or maybe not so well into a score. Because I think that's the first time out of 108 interviews, I believe, that we've heard that. James, you want to add something?
Yeah, one last thing that's benefit from us, and if they want to check it out, feel free to reach out to me. But it also tells us those consultants who maybe are planning on leaving with right now at almost 100% accuracy. So it also gives us that instance, and I can explain that a little bit further if we had more time. But it's another benefit, because you want to get out ahead of that. So you can either talk to them, see what's going on, because usually you have some type of issue maybe. Or they're just looking for another path, and you can get on recruiting way earlier, saving you both time and money.
I mean, I'm going to open the floor for another 30 to 60 seconds. If you could just shine a little bit more light, if you're happy to, James, on how you do that. What are the things you're looking at?
Yeah, so we use a program called Redshift, which is basically just a giant database, but it houses all the data that's coming in from our systems. And we check login information, emails sent from the server, Salesforce information, and it scores them by engagement. And we look at the blips and how often they're doing certain things. And most of them will stay perfectly steady. But once we see a dip, I'll ask questions. Are you on vacation? Something going on? If none of those hit, I watch it for the next week. And then generally, if it dips down again, we actually ask the question. And 9 times out of 10, they'll come straight forward and say, yeah, I got another job.
Got it. There we have it, James. Super fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it, Tom.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. If you are listening on a podcast listening application, then please subscribe, rate, and review. And if you have any questions about the show, if you know a guest, or if you have any questions about sales operations, just hit me up at tomhunt@ebster.com. That's tomhunt@ebster.com.